My family is in the worst mess. Brooke doesn't talk to us. She's had twins.
That was Linda Hogan, revealing how she and Hulk have been completely cut off by their daughter, Brooke, just months after Brooke accused them of mental and physical abuse. Now, it's all in court, and Brooke's testimony is exposing just how deep the damage goes. Some of it directly connects to the circumstances surrounding Hulk Hogan's death. Let me break it down. Brooke's bombshell allegations breaking the family silence. In the annals of professional wrestling history, few families have been as publicly celebrated as the Hogans. For decades, they represented the American dream personified. A legendary wrestler, his beautiful wife, and their two talented children living what appeared to be a charmed existence under the bright lights of fame. But on March 27th, 25, that carefully constructed facade came crashing down in the most devastating way imaginable. When Brooke Hogan, now 36 years old and a mother of newborn twins, made the courageous decision to shatter the silence that had protected her family's darkest secrets for nearly 3 decades. Brooke detailed her reason for cutting off contact with her parents, alleging extreme verbal and mental abuse since childhood that frequently turned physical. This wasn't a moment of impulsive anger, a cry for attention, or a typical celebrity family squabble designed to generate headlines and social media buzz. This was a methodical, carefully considered public statement that had been years in the making, representing the final act of a woman who had endured decades of alleged torment before finding the courage to speak her truth to a world that had idolized her father as a hero. The power and credibility of Brooke's revelations lies not just in their explosive nature, but in their heartbreaking specificity and the clinical precision with which she articulated her experiences. This wasn't a case of vague accusations, emotionless outbursts, or the kind of rambling social media rants that often characterized celebrity meltdowns. Instead, Brooke's allegations included receiving berating and vile text messages, verbal public readings with unbelievably hurtful words that impacted her self-esteem and confidence. The measured, almost therapeutic language suggests someone who had spent years processing trauma, working with mental health professionals, carefully documenting patterns of behavior, and finally reaching the point where silence was no longer an option for her own survival and well-being. These allegations gain even more credibility when we consider the testimony of an unexpected witness who had front-row seats to the Hogan family dysfunction. Bubba, the love sponge, Clem, despite his own controversial history with the family, provided devastating corroboration of the abuse allegations during his divorce testimony. His account paints a picture of a household where violence against Brooke was not only common, but witnessed by multiple people over extended periods. I saw Linda call Brooke fat in the C word, slap her across the face probably 4 or 5 times, kick her in the legs, just belittle her, pull her hair. Well, what caused all this? Nothing. What do you mean? Well, Brooke didn't seem to do anything. Brooke didn't spill her glass of Coca-Cola at the table during dinner. She wasn't talking back and being disrespectful. She was just being a kid, and that got her ass beat uncomfortably more than people would know. This testimony is particularly damning because it describes abuse that was seemingly random and unprovoked, suggesting a pattern of violence that had nothing to do with Brooke's behavior and everything to do with her mother's psychological state and abusive tendencies. To truly understand the magnitude and significance of these allegations, we must consider the context of who Brooke Hogan was supposed to be in the public imagination, and how drastically different her reality apparently was from the carefully crafted image presented to the world. She was the beloved daughter featured prominently on the VH1 reality show Hogan Knows Best, which aired from 2005 to 2007, showcasing what appeared to be a loving, if somewhat overprotective, family dynamic, where a caring father struggled with his daughter's growing independence while maintaining the kind of close-knit family bonds that millions of American families aspired to achieve. Viewers of Hogan Knows Best saw a teenage Brooke navigating typical adolescent challenges, dating, career aspirations, conflicts with parents, while supported by parents who seemed genuinely devoted to her success and well-being. Hulk Hogan was portrayed as the stereotypical overprotective father concerned about his daughter's romantic relationships and determined to shield her from the darker aspects of the entertainment industry. Linda Hogan appeared as the mediating maternal figure, helping to balance her husband's protectiveness with their daughter's need for independence and growth. But according to Brooke's recent revelations and the corroborating testimony from witnesses like Bubba Clem, this television portrayal was nothing more than an elaborate performance designed to hide a much darker reality that was playing out behind the cameras. The show that was supposed to demonstrate family values and healthy relationships was actually, according to Eric Bischoff, a former wrestling executive who noted on his 83 Weeks podcast that the show fueled and expedited the marriage's collapse by exposing private issues to public scrutiny, contributing to the very dysfunction it was meant to conceal. Brooke described being manipulated and lied to and used as a pawn, with others benefiting financially from her suffering of lust and embarrassment. Brooke noted being asked to defend poor behavior publicly, likely referencing past incidents like her father's racist rant, only to feel misinformed and manipulated. The most notable and devastating example occurred in 2015 when Hulk Hogan faced significant backlash after a leaked transcript from a 2007 sex tape revealed him using racist language, including the N-word, while discussing his daughter, Brooke's dating life. The leaked audio revealed Hogan expressing discomfort about his daughter dating a black man and making explicitly racist statements that shocked fans and destroyed his carefully crafted image as an all-American hero. At the time, Brooke publicly defended her father with what seemed like genuine conviction, appearing in interviews and making statements that portrayed his racist remarks as an aberration rather than a reflection of his true character. "He's not racist. I definitely would not want things that I say behind closed doors, and I'm sure you wouldn't, or anybody else watching. Nobody would want their lowest moment to be filmed and aired for the world to see." Now, with the benefit of Brooke's new revelations and the perspective that comes from years of reflection and healing, we can see this defense in an entirely different and deeply troubling light. But, as it would turn out, Hulk had his own demons. The many vices of Hulk Hogan behind the American hero facade. While Brooke Hogan's allegations of childhood abuse painted a disturbing picture of family dysfunction that shocked fans and observers worldwide, they represented only one facet of a much larger, more complex, and more deeply troubling story of personal destruction that had been unfolding behind closed doors for decades. Terry Jean Bollea, the man behind the iconic Hulk Hogan persona, harbored numerous dark secrets and engaged in a pattern of destructive behaviors that would systematically destroy not only his family relationships, but also his health, reputation, and the legacy he had spent decades building. Perhaps the most physically destructive and personally devastating of Hogan's vices was his long-standing, deeply entrenched addiction to prescription painkillers, a dependency that grew directly from the brutal physical toll that decades of professional wrestling had taken on his body. The man who had entertained millions with his larger-than-life persona and seemingly superhuman strength was behind the scenes, trapped in a cycle of chronic pain and substance abuse that would affect every aspect of his life and relationships. In a resurfaced interview that provides chilling insight into the depth of his addiction, Hogan himself described the vicious cycle that had consumed years of his life and undoubtedly affected his ability to be a present, stable father during his children's most formative years. I was on the pain pills. I did have doctors just writing prescriptions after prescriptions, and all of a sudden it becomes a vicious cycle. As they were giving me the pain meds, I was in crazy pain. I couldn't even function. But as soon as things started to wind down, they would keep giving me the pain meds. It got to a point where when I had the 10th back surgery, the pharmacy would call me, "Your prescription's ready." The continuation of his addiction story reveals the psychological dependency that had developed beyond any legitimate medical need. And I would go like a dog chasing a bar. I'd go pick it up. Then, finally, I just looked at myself and I said, "I'm not in pain. I don't need this. My body hurts from all the wrestling injuries, but I'm not in this excruciating pain that I can't live with. I can live with this, the amount of pain I have." Hogan's relationship with alcohol was equally destructive, long-standing, and deeply problematic, representing another layer of substance abuse that compounded the effects of his prescription drug dependency. During his wrestling career, he would consume up to 12 beers after a match to cope with physical pain and the demands of his profession. This level of alcohol consumption goes far beyond casual drinking, social consumption, or even stress relief. It represents a serious substance abuse problem that would have significantly affected his ability to function as a father, husband, and role model during the most important years of his children's lives. The combination of heavy drinking and the immense stress of maintaining his high-profile career, managing his public image, and dealing with the constant pressures of fame created a perfect storm for poor decision-making, impaired judgment, and destructive behavior that would have profound consequences for his family. This heavy drinking contributed to health issues, including bloating and nightly junk food binges, which affected his overall well-being. But the physical effects were likely secondary to the psychological and behavioral impacts that chronic alcohol abuse would have had on his parenting abilities, his emotional stability, and his capacity for healthy family relationships. The timeline of Hogan's alcohol abuse is particularly significant when we consider Brooks' allegations of childhood abuse. It wasn't until January 2023 that Hogan made the pivotal decision to quit drinking after attending a New Year's Eve party where he observed behaviors he did not condone. This means that for the majority of Brooks' childhood, adolescence, and young adulthood, the most formative and crucial years of her development, Her father was struggling with active alcohol addiction, which would have profoundly affected his parenting abilities, his emotional availability, his judgment, and his capacity for providing the stable, nurturing environment that children need to thrive. But Hogan's vices extended far beyond substance abuse into areas that would prove even more damaging to his family relationships, his public reputation, and his moral standing in the eyes of those who had once looked up to him as a hero. The 2015 scandal that temporarily destroyed his career and permanently tarnished his legacy involved more than just private mistakes or momentary lapses in judgment. It revealed a deeply troubling worldview and character flaws that contradicted everything his public persona represented. The leaked transcript from a 2007 sex tape revealed him using racist language, including the N-word, while discussing his daughter Brooke's dating life, expressing discomfort about her dating a black man, and stating, "I am a racist to a point." These weren't words spoken in anger, heat-of-the-moment expressions, or statements taken out of context. They were calm, deliberate expressions of racist beliefs that revealed the true character of a man who had built his career on representing American values. The implications of this racist rant go far beyond the immediate damage to his career and public image. This conversation took place in 2007 when Brooke was 19 years old and presumably dating or considering dating. Imagine being a young woman and learning that your father not only disapproved of your romantic choices based purely on race, but that he held such deeply prejudiced, hateful views about an entire group of people. The psychological impact of discovering that one's parent harbors such hatred, prejudice, and moral ugliness would be devastating and would fundamentally alter the parent-child relationship in ways that might never be repaired. The consequences were swift, severe, and comprehensive. WWE terminated Hogan's contract and removed all references to him from their website, including his Hall of Fame profile. Companies like Mattel stopped producing Hogan action figures, and major retailers like Target, Toys R Us, and Walmart removed his merchandise from their stores. The scandal led to widespread criticism from wrestling colleagues, fans, and civil rights organizations, permanently tarnishing his legacy and destroying the carefully crafted image he had spent decades building. The sex tape scandal itself reveals another deeply troubling aspect of Hogan's character: moral compass and capacity for betrayal. In 2006, Hogan had a sexual encounter with Heather Clem, the wife of his friend Bubba, the love sponge Clem, which was secretly recorded. While Hogan claimed he was unaware of the recording, the fact remains that he was having an affair with his friend's wife, representing a profound betrayal of trust, friendship, and basic moral decency. This pattern of infidelity, betrayal, and moral failure extended throughout his personal relationships, including his marriage with Linda Hogan. Linda accused Hulk of having an affair with Christiane Plant, a close friend of their daughter Brooke, which was later confirmed by Plant herself in a 2008 National Enquirer interview. The fact that Hogan would engage in an affair with someone so intimately connected to his family, someone his daughter trusted, confided in, and considered a friend, demonstrates a callous disregard for the emotional well-being of his loved ones and a willingness to sacrifice family relationships for his own gratification. Linda's allegations went far beyond infidelity to include claims of physical and emotional abuse, that paint a picture of domestic violence and psychological terrorism. In her 2011 memoir, Wrestling the Hulk, My Life Against the Ropes, Linda alleged that Hulk tore her shirt, threw lamps, held her down with hands around her throat, slammed doors and pounded walls, causing her to fear for her life. These allegations describe a pattern of behavior characterized by violence, intimidation, and psychological abuse that would create an atmosphere of fear and chaos in the family home. In a 2016 Inside Edition interview, Linda stated, "I was always afraid he would kill me in one of his rages." This statement reveals the level of terror and psychological trauma that Linda experienced during their marriage, and it provides crucial context for understanding the environment in which Brooke and her brother Nick were raised. Children who grow up in homes characterized by domestic violence often suffer lasting psychological damage even when they are not the direct targets of abuse. The steroid allegations that surfaced in the early 1990s add another layer to the complex picture of Hogan's personal struggles and pattern of dishonesty. Initially, Hogan denied steroid use publicly, claiming on the Arsenio Hall show in 1991 that his 300-plus lb frame was from natural training, but later admitted to steroid use during Vince McMahon's 1994 steroid trial, stating that steroid use was fairly common among WWF wrestlers in the 1980s, while steroid use was more accepted and widespread in professional wrestling during that era. Hogan's initial denials, followed by admissions under legal immunity, suggest a pattern of dishonesty and deception that would characterize many of his public statements throughout his career. Linda Hogan's shocking revelations in the family's final destruction. As if Brooke's devastating allegations against her parents weren't shocking enough to fundamentally alter public perception of one of America's most famous wrestling families, the public would soon discover that the dysfunction, toxicity, and psychological warfare within the Hogan household ran even deeper than anyone had imagined. Linda Hogan, Hulk's ex-wife and Brooke's mother, had her own explosive revelations that would paint an even more disturbing and comprehensive picture of the man behind the wrestling legend, while simultaneously revealing her own deeply troubling behaviors toward their daughter and exposing the full scope of a family system that was fundamentally broken at every level. The most shocking and revealing aspect of Linda's public statements wasn't necessarily what she revealed about Hulk's character and behavior, although those revelations were significant and damaging, but rather how she chose to respond to her own daughter's desperate cries for help, acknowledgement, and validation. When Brooke courageously shared her allegations of systematic childhood abuse, Linda's response was not only lacking in maternal instinct, but actively cruel and designed to further harm her already traumatized daughter. Linda's response was swift, vicious, and utterly lacking in the kind of protective, nurturing instinct that most people expect from mothers. Rather than showing concern, empathy, curiosity about her daughter's pain, or any attempt at understanding what had driven Brooke to make such serious public allegations, Linda immediately went on the offensive with a counterattack that was as psychologically cruel as it was strategically calculated to undermine her daughter's credibility. On March 28, 2025, just one day after Brooke's revelations, Linda responded via Facebook post stating that Brooke is a narcissist, just like her dad, and denied treating her as alleged, admitting only to spanking her once and calling her names. This response demonstrated exactly the kind of dismissive, blame-shifting, gaslighting behavior that abuse victims often describe from their abusers. Instead of taking responsibility, showing empathy, or expressing any concern for her daughter's well-being, Linda immediately labeled her daughter with a psychiatric diagnosis and minimized her own admitted misconduct, as if spanking and name-calling were insignificant or normal parental behaviors. But Linda's response became even more disturbing, calculated, and psychologically damaging as she continued her public attack on her own daughter's character and mental stability. She alleged that Brooke, while drunk, broke her collarbone and cut her lip, insisting on hospital treatment for alleged poisoning, which Linda denied. These counter-allegations seem specifically designed to paint Brooke as an unstable, violent, substance-abusing person whose claims couldn't be trusted or taken seriously. The timing and nature of these accusations, made immediately after her daughter's abuse allegations, raised serious questions about their validity, their motivations, and Linda's mental state. Perhaps most revealing and disturbing of all was Linda's immediate threat of legal action against her own daughter. She stated, "I'm not going to defend myself against these ridiculous allegations. I'll do that in court if she keeps it up." This response showed a complete absence of maternal concern, protective instinct, or desire for healing and reconciliation. Instead, it demonstrated a combative, adversarial approach to her own daughter's pain that perfectly exemplified the toxic family dynamic that Brooke had described in her allegations. A loving, healthy parent, confronted with such serious allegations from their adult child, might express sadness, addressed or healed, but had instead continued to poison family relationships, damage their children, and create ongoing trauma for over a decade. The ongoing nature of this family conflict raises important and troubling questions about the cycle of dysfunction and trauma that can perpetuate itself across generations when it is not properly addressed or treated. Despite her harsh, cruel response to Brooke's allegations, Linda has also made contradictory statements that reveal the complexity, confusion, and psychological damage that characterizes dysfunctional family systems. She has acknowledged Hulk's parenting in some context, noting he spent $3 million on Brooke's career and was a good father, though she maintained he was a shitty husband. This kind of contradictory messaging, simultaneously praising and attacking the same person, expressing love and hatred in the same breath, defending and condemning identical behaviors, is exactly the kind of confusing, unstable, psychologically damaging environment that can create lasting trauma in children. When parents send mixed messages about each other, about family relationships, about what constitutes appropriate behavior, children are left without a stable foundation for understanding love, trust, safety, and healthy boundaries. The financial aspects of Linda's revelations also paint a disturbing picture of how money, exploitation, and emotional manipulation intertwined with the family's dysfunction in ways that further damaged the children's well-being and psychological development. Linda's post referenced spending over $3 million on Brooke's career, framing herself as a supportive parent despite the estrangement. This response represents classic emotional manipulation, attempting to use financial expenditures as evidence of love, while ignoring the emotional and psychological damage that money cannot heal, repair, or comma. Pensate 4. The implicit message behind Linda's financial arguments was that Brooke should be grateful rather than complaining, that the money spent on her career somehow negated or justified any abuse she might have suffered, and that financial investment equated to parental love and devotion. This sentiment further validated Brooke's claims about being treated as a commodity, an investment, or a business venture rather than a beloved daughter deserving of unconditional love, protection, and emotional support. The divorce settlement itself had been contentious, revealing and indicative of the deep dysfunction that had characterized the marriage for years before its public collapse. The settlement, involving assets worth approximately $30 million, saw Linda receiving more than 70% of their liquid assets, specifically $7.44 million out of $10.41 million, along with 40% ownership in Hulk's companies and an additional $3 million property settlement. The fact that Linda received such a disproportionately large portion of the marital assets suggests that the court may have found her allegations of abuse, infidelity, and misconduct credible, or at least serious enough to warrant significant financial compensation for the damage she had suffered during the marriage, adding another layer of complexity, vindictiveness, and ongoing dysfunction to this family saga. In 2019, a Florida judge ordered Hulk to pay over $180,000 in Linda's legal fees, ruling that he had deliberately created legal hurdles to prevent her from accessing her entitled share of his earnings, including a $115 million payout from a lawsuit against Gawker. This court ruling suggests daughter had cut off contact, seemingly unaware that her own behavior and response to Brooke's allegations demonstrated exactly why such drastic measures had been necessary for Brooke's psychological survival and well-being. The ongoing nature of this family conflict, the inability of any of the adult family members to take responsibility for their actions, and the continued patterns of blame, denial, and psychological warfare suggests that the dysfunction and trauma that characterized Brooke's childhood had never been addressed, treated, or resolved. Instead, these toxic patterns had been allowed to fester and continued damaging family relationships for decades. The tragic culmination of this family's destruction came with Hulk Hogan's death on July 24, 2025, at age 71 from cardiac arrest. The timing is particularly devastating and heartbreaking. Hulk died just months after his daughter's public allegations and his ex-wife's renewed attacks on his character, meaning that any possibility of reconciliation, accountability, healing, or redemption died with him. That brings us to the end of this video. For more interesting videos like this, click on the cards on your screen.